All right, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. It is Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo. They are co-authors of a bestseller called The Six Pillars of Intimacy. They have been through a ton, and I got to say that most people that talk about relationships either don't have the training or don't have the experience. But there's no way you can to minimize the experience that these guys have been through, and they've been able to find resilience, find connection, find their way through. And we live in a time, I think everyone agree, we all heard about this, where the stress of COVID ripped people apart a little bit, particularly insofar as people that are not used to spending a lot of time together were suddenly locked in a house together and maybe discovered they didn't have what they thought they have. Tony and Alisa have been married for 25 years. They have two children, and they have been through some stuff. They were recommended to me by one of my crack producers from my HLN program, and all my producers were crack on that show, to be fair. But they came highly recommended, so let's get into it. Tony and Alisa, thank you for joining us. There you are.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. So I'm not quite sure where to start. Let's, before we pull the curtain back and start making recommendations, why don't we tell people your history a little bit, sort of what you've been through, and if you don't mind, this sounds like this history is going to be pretty involved. I don't know if we want to talk, maybe just give us the history. If you want to slip in how you found your way through, I'm not sure if there was overlapping on some of these things, or I imagine there was, because some of it looks to me like the stress was so great from the one thing that you went to another, and then that one went out of control, and that's just the way these things kind of work. So who wants to be my subject?
Go first. I'll jump in. I want to say this from the beginning. Elise and I, when we first met, I think that's where some of the dysfunction even just started. When we first met, I had just turned 21. I would say I was probably pretty much an alcoholic. When you're blacking out and waking up at 3 a.m. in, downtown Boulder and trying to make it back home and smoking weed and doing whatever, it wasn't the greatest start. But we found each other in Boulder, Colorado in 1994, and it was supposed to just be this summer fling. And that's how our relationship started.
According to whom? According to whom?
We both mutually agreed because he was a student at CU and I was a student at a small school in Indiana, DePaul University, and I was going back for my senior year. So it was very much like,
got it.
We got 8 weeks, it'll be what it is.
Yeah. And so when she did leave, I was crying. I was just like, this is the love of my life, and I can't believe I'm letting her go. But there was definitely dysfunction in the long distance relationship. And then we ended up getting married young. I was 23, she was 22 when we said our I do's and had no clue what marriage was going to look like, other than maybe, looking at your rom-coms where everything ends up happily ever after. And it's just like every sex scene is the perfect sex scene. And that's what we thought marriage was supposed to be. And unfortunately, when you step into marriage with those ideals and those expectations and they don't happen, things can go sideways.
Let me ask you this, just so I understand really quickly, Lisa, so I understand the perspective that you guys bring. What are do each of you have professional training or anything like that, or what's your sort of backgrounds?
So I got my undergraduate degree in psychology and then went on to pursue careers in business and eventually got certified as a coach after seeing the needs that we were having in the One Extraordinary Marriage family.
Sure.
Yeah. I have no professional degrees.
Okay. What'd you do for a living?
When we were young marrieds, I happened to start in business and sales. And then I got into what's called paintless dent repair. And so I learned the trade. My dad was a plumber and general contractor here in Southern California. So I grew up in the trades, went to college and didn't really feel like I wanted to sit behind a desk. So I learned a trade and thought I was going to do it for 3 years. And that became my career for 22 years.
Interesting. Okay, so now we're into this idealized. There's alcoholism lurking in the background. You have this idealized start to your marriage, and what happens?
Pretty quickly, I had known that Tony was, reading Playboy magazines, looking at porn prior to getting married. but the early years of our marriage, when we were young, when we weren't making a whole lot of money, we were working opposite shifts. And that's really when the pornography started to escalate. And, it escalated into chat rooms. It, became one of those things that when he would travel, when he was doing the paintless dent repair and would travel to the East Coast, it got to the point where you were even trying to pick up women in bars.
Yep.
And so we started facing pretty quickly a disconnect in our sexual intimacy that just, I think, really left us both wanting and disappointed in what marriage was.
Yeah. It wasn't fun. I'll tell you that. We lived in Palm Desert. We had no money. I can remember summer sitting there, no AC on, and thinking, this is the worst thing ever. And why are we doing this thing called marriage?
Yeah. And,
that's awful.
As our marriage continued to progress, we were also battling a lot of debt. I mean, because we were long distance back in, 94, that was still cell phone or not, that was before cell phones. And so we were long distance and financed the entire first year of our dating relationship and then the early years of our marriage on credit cards. So you've kind of got this whirlwind thing going on where we're starting, a lot of alcohol in our marriage. We've got pornography in our marriage. We aren't making a lot of money, but we're trying to keep up with friends. And so the debt. And so we were in, we look back now and we're like the perfect storm. I mean, any one of those three could have destroyed our marriage. And
Tony, there were some Indian casinos around that area. Did you do any of that?
I didn't. I never got into gambling. Yeah, Morongo's up there, and
the one bias he didn't have.
Yeah, no, I never got into the casino scene. It wasn't one of the things that really intrigued me at all.
Good. That may have been.
Yeah.
We'll put that under. Good. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
That might have taken you guys out.
We were trying to make marriage work, but we were so disconnected. We didn't know how to talk to one another.
Yeah.
Our sex life sucked. We're struggling financially. And then you throw in the loss, we start having children, and then you have the loss of a child. And
well, wait, slow down. We don't know about that. Hold on. We don't know about this loss of a child thing. Yeah, this is the first time we're hearing about that. So you do what every couple does when things start going bad. I know the solution. Kids. That's going to solve our problem. So you have kids. How'd that work?
Oh my gosh, I still have this vivid memory. The first child is now 19, but I have vivid memory. He was probably 3 weeks old. I finally get out to go to the grocery store. I leave my cell phone at home. And when I get back home, Tony is sweating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Alex had literally screamed his head off for the entire time, 45 minutes that I was gone. And we didn't know what we didn't know about parenting. So that was, anybody that thinks having kids is a solution, I'm here to tell you, adds a whole lot of stress.
Yeah.
And just
only makes things worse.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had
how did you deal with the cost? I mean, you're already in debt and the child adds really potentially exponential cost. How did you guys deal with that?
So what we ended up doing, what was it? Our third year marriage, I left my job and hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. I took a sabbatical at 27. I was like, I'm out. And I hiked from Mexico to Canada for 4.5 months. And when I got back, it was a tough go. So we hadn't had Alex yet. And it was just a tough go. I was deep into my pornography again, was shutting out the world. I was scared to even go outside because you go from just hanging out on the mountaintops to being in concrete jungle of Orange County at the time where we lived. And about a year after that, we decided it was time to move. Needed to get out of California. I grew up in California. My family's here, but it was like, we need to move. And so we went up to Spokane, Washington to just get a reprieve. And so right before Alex was born, we had been working on all of our debt and had actually finished that. We had actually gotten rid of all our debt just about the time Alex was born.
That's the first time we ever worked as a team in our marriage.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And so the child comes, and that probably goes okay for a while.
And then we get pregnant for the second time, about a year and a half later, almost 2 years later. And the day after Alex's second birthday, I deliver Andrew at 18 weeks, and he
Oh my
never took a
gosh.
breath. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
18
And
weeks is too little.
too little. There was
Yeah.
never a chance.
Yeah.
And I, 2 weeks before Christmas, and that's when I started struggling with depression, because it was, what do I do now? How do we relate to one another? We'd figured out how to get out of debt, but pornography was still there. We were still, not communicating well. And now on top of that, we've lost a child.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the darkest time. That was a tough time. I can still remember in those moments, just being mad and angry and just
Mm-hmm.
crying and hurt, because Alisa, even though our marriage wasn't perfect or what we thought it was going to be, she's my wife and I love her, and I loved her then and I love her more now. And yet then she was gone. She was lost. I couldn't connect with her in any way, shape, or form. Alex was 2, and I didn't know how to address the anger I felt inside. So all I remember,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still vivid in my mind right now, and it's one of those times that I've had to just, forgive myself. But I just remember trying to get Alex to sleep. Alisa's checked out, and just screaming at this 2-year-old who had no idea what was going on, and just so mad, and finally just falling on the floor, just crying, and just like, I can't live with this. And it was a tough period, because I needed my mate, my wife, beside me to do this, and she wasn't there, and just didn't know where to go, and it was a tough time. Yeah.
You must have been drinking.
I can't recall. I was big into cycling. I grew up road cycling, and I remember in that period of time there were just weekends when I would just take off, and it
Got it.
wasn't
So
wasn't
that's sort of your
alcohol.
move, is to leave.
Yeah.
Check out,
Yeah.
check out on the bike,
Yeah.
check out with the porn, that kind of thing. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So move us forward a little more quickly if you can, because it's getting very painful. So how do we, where's the bottom, and how do you get out?
So the bottom, that was the bottom.
Yep.
Okay.
Within, 3 months after losing Andrew, we were pregnant again. And in that space too, Tony was coming to me and saying, I need to finish this. Pornography addiction needs to be done. We need to get back a handle on what our life is going to be. And we tackled the porn first.
Yep.
That was the first big, like, we're going after this in our marriage.
Yeah. And then we got over that. Abby's born. And then, we're just moving along. And so year 11, we come into this place where we got a 5 and a 2-year-old. Great. I mean, we're just moving along. It's like things are going well. They're not extraordinary. They're not amazing, but they're just sort of like, we're here. And we happened to be watching a TV show. Our friends had their daughters on a TV show. They were doing like beach tennis. And after their show, these 2 couples came on, and they were sharing about how they had done sex challenges. And it was just intriguing. One had gifted her 40-year-old husband for his birthday 365 days of sex. They never say how long they had sex. And the second one, they had done 101 days. And it was just an intriguing segment that we were watching.
Different way to do marriage. What does it look like to make one aspect of your marriage a priority and to really focus? And that episode, that segment on TV actually became the catalyst for changing everything in our marriage.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Did you get professional help at any point? Did you said some things that were like, we got over porn addiction. Tony had the porn addiction. We didn't, but we were affected by Tony's porn addiction for sure. And Tony's porn addiction was affected by us, but Tony had to get over the porn addiction.
And we started taking steps when we saw that segment. Tony challenged me to do a sex challenge. And in that space, we learned and I do very intentionally use the word we learned what it looked like to, after all these years, make our marriage a priority again, what it looked like to be able to talk to one
Mm.
another again, what it looked like to
Yeah.
have fun as a married couple, not, boring and roommates and just going
Mhm.
through the motions. And, you actually just drew
Susan,
a
I wonder
line
if you
in
have
the sand.
any questions or comments. I'm curious on your, go ahead.
So you addressed your sex life problem first, and you said,
Yeah.
okay,
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
has to change,
Yeah.
obviously. And who was less interested?
That would be me.
Which is
Tony
typical,
suggested it, and I
because
said no.
that's a normal thing for females, because we're busy with the kids, and we just don't have that drive like the guys do at that
Mhm.
particular time in our life, which,
Yeah.
I did the same thing to Drew. I understand that. But it's good that you address that, because maybe then
Well,
he wouldn't want to use porn so much if he was getting a little more attention in that area, which we kind of find not, as important. So maybe that had a little bit to do with it, not the addiction part of it, but maybe just the intimacy part of it.
Yeah, and by that time the porn was already done. I think more than anything, it was the connection. Like, how do we stay connected through this thing called marriage in all different forms of intimacy?
Mhm.
And that was just the catalyst for us to get started again and going, okay, we've been at this for 11 years.
Mhm.
What are we going to do? Because we're determined to live out our I do's,
Mm.
you know? And so what are we going to do to make this change? Or are we going to just go through life and our marriage just ho hum? And we just decided to get radical around this one area that was the impetus to really bring in the other forms of intimacy, emotional. We talked about spiritual intimacy during that time, financial intimacy. And so that was in those 60 days, something changed in us
Mhm.
that we never had happened before. And we were like, wow, this is amazing. Like, there is more than just sort of living out in this way of like do the chores, look at the kids, go to work, and come home and repeat.
Right. Yeah.
Susan, get any
Completely
thoughts? Because it's very, very interesting to me on a lot of levels.
I used to feel like intimacy was like if he did the dishes for me. Like, I was like,
No.
okay, now you're
And
gonna
I
do
used and I used to get confused when you would talk about intimacy because it didn't
like, it was
make
like
sense.
if he didn't just sit on the couch and watch TV while I was doing all the work, I was always like
Mm.
I felt like I was more in touch with him. I felt better
Mhm.
about myself because he was putting an effort out, and he still does the dishes, even if he has a busier day than me. Um, and, but I also cook dinner, and, we trade off. But I remember thinking, pre menopause, that that was sexy, that meant he cared about me, or he wanted to be closer to me, and he knew that I wasn't going to be angry that he didn't do anything.
Well, talk a little bit more about post-menopause. In other words, how did it change? Susan.
Well, I mean, first of all, when my kids all left for college, that was like the best babysitting center in the world. And I had freedom,
Mhm.
we were alone.
Mhm.
And then I had a hormone replacement after I went through menopause, which was hell. Because my vagina dried up, and I was like, okay, don't want to have sex. Something's wrong. So had that
Mhm.
arranged, and
Arranged.
yeah, and
Solved.
suddenly I was like, I want to be the one instigating sex. What is wrong here? And then a light went on, and I was like, you know what? Men and women are totally different. And I got
Mhm.
it. And I have a lower voice now. I used to have a really high
So what
voice.
happened is I gained my wife achieved empathic appreciation of her male partner and all male partners by becoming more male, essentially
Yeah, I
by
did.
being androgenized. She was like, holy shit. And in fact, every female to male transgender I've spoken to says the same thing. They'll say something on the order of, I'm sorry. Like, oh my God, I didn't
Mhm.
know. Like, and
Mhm.
when my response to those folks are, Yeah, and God did that to us when we were 13. I want you to imagine being 13 and stuck with that same feeling. No, I'm not kidding. And then again, we're talking about my conversations with. I had a long conversation with Chaz Bono about this, and he was like, oh yeah, oh my God, I can't even imagine. So there you go. That's it. Hormones have a lot to do with it, but it's one of the layers of your story that makes me interested. One of the interesting elements of your story, anyway, is Alisa. You were sort of 5 years postpartum at that point, with a major postpartum depressive episode, right?
I wouldn't say it was
5 and
major.
11-year-old.
When we did, at what point in time when you're asking about 5 and 11?
When you did the sex challenge.
The kids were 2 and 5.
Oh, 2 and 5. Okay, it was much before that. So, you could still be, well, if they had put you on meds, you probably still would have been on meds. Is that the case?
I was never medicated.
Okay.
In coming through that depression, it was very much, and in hindsight, I will tell you, I should have gone and gotten help. It's what I tell women now. And I can, well, how old is she now? She's 16. So 14 years ago, it still wasn't being talked about. Postpartum depression was not talked about then the way it is now. And when I look back on where I was when Andrew died, and even after Abby, when I was trying to figure out things, in hindsight is 2020. And if you're dealing with postpartum depression, please go get help. Don't do what I did and try and sort it out. It just
right. It is a profoundly biological process. It is dangerous. It is dangerous for mom and child. Needs serious attention, and don't screw with it. And there's very effective treatments out there. And it doesn't mean you're broken or a bad mom, even though you're feeling all those things with the depression. It has nothing to do with anything. You're just going to get through this biological state you're in, and everything will be fine. It will be fine. But don't do that to yourself. And by the same token, postpartum psychosis, which is even a more dangerous process, anything like that. These are biological events that are precipitated by the pregnancy and then being not pregnant suddenly. Please take care of these things. And then, the postpartum biology shifts too. I mean, that's the part I'm kind of interested in, which is that you weren't interested, which is sort of normal. And it's kind of God's way of making sure we don't have too many children. So we don't, it's certainly the way we make sure we don't have one on one. Yeah, we're supposed to make sure we don't have one on top of the other, but you guys overrode those impulses.
Unless you're the Derricos.
Yeah, Derricos, yeah. They have 17 kids or something. But how did you overcome that kind of resistance and that, because the biology, again, when at that stage of motherhood can be kind of powerful, where it's even physical intimacy looks not just uninteresting, but kind of uncomfortable. How did you overcome all that?
For me, literally, I describe it as my come to Jesus moment. I was standing in, Tony had suggested we do this sex challenge. I immediately said no. He's hopeful something's going to happen that night. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go put a face mask on. We're getting nothing tonight. Like, it's over. And the next day I'm standing in my garage with a basket full of laundry. And this thought comes to my mind. And I do call it my come to Jesus moment. And the voice says, if you're not willing to try, your marriage is likely over. He's not asking you to do anything crazy. He just wants you to make him a priority. And he wants to have sex with you. And it's not a bad thing when a husband wants to have sex with his wife. And I was like,
right.
Oh, that's.
I wonder if that was your intuition.
Well, it's definitely your intuition. I mean,
come to Jesus, like somebody's whispering in your ear, like your grandma or something.
Well, to the people that have these moments of insight like that, often, I'm sure, Alisa, you can talk more about it, will describe it as coming from the outside in. It doesn't feel like it came from in you. It felt like somebody put it in there, right?
Yeah, it could have been literally somebody standing behind me and just whispering in my ear. And it was so powerful. Yeah. It was so powerful. And the realization that with a 2 and a 5-year-old, I didn't want my marriage to be over. And again, he wasn't asking me to give up anything. He just wanted, not just, but he wanted to have sex with me on a daily basis because we were going to do a 60-day sex challenge. And
which women cannot believe men can do.
So yeah, Susan, speak to that, because Susan's like that. They literally that seems like sure, try it. Yeah, you'll lose interest after 3 days, and we're like, no,
Well, there used to be
no.
a running joke on with Adam and Drew on Loveline that Drew was a very passionate man, and we weren't having sex. And a couple of weeks went by, and I was like, shoot, we haven't had sex in 2 weeks, and he was like, I know. Maybe it was a month. I don't know. But, and I was running after 3 3-year-olds or whatever. I wasn't really in my sexual prime. But then I said, God, I swear, I'm going to make a bet you can't have sex every day for a week. And he's like, oh, yes, I can.
That was no problem.
Yes.
That's
And he did. He tried. He came. He got
That was with
home.
me on
He was like, I was like, okay, I guess I have to do it. I bet him.
That was with me on 4 hours of sleep and getting up at 5 in the morning and all the craziness that was going on in our life at the time.
And he'd get home at 1 in the morning, but because we couldn't really do it when the kids were awake, you know what I mean? And but I was like shocked. Like it just didn't make sense to me that men had the ability to be so extremely sexual every day. I just didn't get it. I dated guys, and then we had a long distance relationship, so we only saw each other like maybe once a week on the weekends or whatever. And then we moved in together, and he was working a lot, so it wasn't like we were really making sex a priority. And then we got married, and then I got pregnant, so that we couldn't have sex for like years. So I didn't really understand men's needs, like, because I hadn't lived with somebody who had a really strong drive. So I mean, I know I pushed him away, and I feel bad about it now, so I'm trying to make it up.
Yeah. But Susan, I
don't know what I
want to say,
should do with that. Let's talk more about that. So what was that, Lisa? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I was going to say,
I
when
was
you
lost
talk
in
about
thought.
we actually, I mean, one of the things that we talk about within the One Family, our community, is doing a 7-day sex challenge, right? Both husband and wife prioritizing sex for 7 days, not just to make it about the sex becomes the catalyst, but to actually watch what happens for both husband and wife when they're making one another a priority. Right? To see how your conversations shift, to see, you mentioned that Drew does the dishes. I mean, I remember when we started doing our challenge, all of a sudden I was convinced that the dish fairy had moved into our house, because I would, put a child to bed and come out and my kitchen was clean. I'm like, what is this? Who's moved into my house?
That's all it took.
So again, we are, we are, as male humans, we are exceedingly simple to make happy. It's exceedingly easy, and everything else we'll start wanting to make the relationship work, and we'll start wanting to not fight. We'll start wanting to do things. Our whole sort of biology shifts, so naturally we become more open to stuff. And when you're, there's a flip side to it when we're being rejected, which is, particularly when they're younger males, which is, look, I've got this biology I've been dealing with since I was 13. I've selected you to help me with this, to be the focus of it, and you're rejecting it. It feels not just like you don't understand. It feels like a deep wound with it too, because it feels like this is a really intimate part of me you're rejecting. And so men get they don't admit to themselves, frankly, how wounding it is and how much it gets them spinning and thinking of other things and turning to pornography and other stuff. So,
well, they have to take care of it somewhere else. So.
Well, that's sort of, I mean, they don't have to violate their vows, but they have to do something.
Yeah. and that becomes kind of weird
when
for
you
them.
tell, there was back when we were that age, and when we would have conversations about, well, something's got to be done, you'd be like, oh, how you say good day? How do you? It's like,
wait, I have to do this?
No,
Wait,
not even that. It was just sort of, well, that's, toxic masculinity writ large. Here it is.
Right.
And,
I didn't even know the word for it, but maybe, yeah.
And that was, again, no understanding. And say what you will about Laura Schlesinger, back in the days in the 90s, she was pointing this out over and over and over again. I remember, because I knew Laura, and I had some issues with some of the stuff she was doing, but this one area she was crystal clear about and was giving really good messages, I thought, back then. And so it's been around for people to grab onto, but I've not seen a couple do it. So I'm glad you guys are doing this. And so you mentioned your community. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we go through our 60-day section. I just got to hit this just real quick. And because Susan, what you're saying, when Alisa said yes to me, I was a deer in the headlight. I was like, yes to what?
Yeah.
She's like, we're going to do a challenge. And the first thing that I thought about was like, oh no, I got to perform. How am I going to perform? Am I going to be actually able to do this? And so
Normal.
I was petrified for a little bit. But we finished 40 out of the 60 days. And it revolutionized our marriage. And we were able to start speaking. We had shared it with our church, and they asked us to speak at a retreat. And after we spoke about this, people are like, what's next? What are you going to do? We're like, we're not going to do anything. We're happy. We're like going to move on, and we're going to, keep going, doing our thing. And if we need marriage counseling or coaching along the way, we'll get it. People are like, no, you need to share more. And so we started the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. And that was 12 years ago now. And we just began sharing from our hearts, just being open, honest, and transparent about marriage. The stuff that happens every day, every week, the good, the bad, the fun times, the hard times. And just the one family is who is our audience. It's who we speak to and we share each and every week with. And it's just been a journey over 12 years of us even learning and studying marriages and studying our own. And we just got really serious about like what's happening out there and how can we understand it better, so that way we can just speak to those, just a normal person who's just going down the street going, man, my marriage is struggling. It's not horrible. If there's addiction or trauma, then we always say go get help. Right. Like make sure you're getting help to deal with the trauma, with the addiction. You need to deal with that. We're here to encourage you and give you hope and show you that, hey, where you're at, where you're stuck right now, you don't have to stay there forever.
So what if I take the quiz when you go to the oneextraordinarymarriage.com, right? You get the 6 pillars of intimacy quiz. And what am I going to learn on that quiz?
So really, we designed that quiz to be a companion to the book that we wrote that was released last fall called The 6 Pillars of Intimacy. And what we realized when we did that 60-day sex challenge and just in the last 12 years of looking at marriage is that while so many people will say, I want more intimacy in my marriage, and they're often referring to the sexual intimacy, what we found when we did that, and we've looked at, talked to hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, is that there's really 6 different forms of intimacy. And so the quiz helps you identify where you're strong, whether it's emotional intimacy, how the two of you communicate, physical, financial, spiritual, recreational, and sexual.
Yeah. Tell me about financial intimacy. That's the least sort of intuitive category.
Absolutely is.
Yeah. A lot of times people hear financial and intimacy and they're like, dude, how does that go together? But really, if you look at every relationship, every marriage, money is an aspect of that. How the two of you plan financially, how you're providing for one another, whether we're talking about, monthly bills to estate planning. And really, it's about developing this closeness and connection in all areas of your finances.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised there's not a parenting intimacy category, right? Or does that fall into something else?
Actually, and we literally just did a show on this last week.
Yeah, we did.
But when a husband and wife develop strength in each one of the pillars, it completely shifts how they parent, not just how they're relating to one another, but how they're speaking to their children. And so out of the education and understanding that they have, they shift how they parent.
Yeah.
You guys have been together how long now? 25 years?
Yes. Married 25,
right?
together 27.
Yeah.
And you had a very, what do they call it in French? Like a coup de coeur or something, where you had a lightning bolt experience with Alisa. Like, this is the love of my life, right? Or at least it became that when she tried to leave. Or was it at the beginning?
Yeah, it became that when she tried to leave, yes.
2 months in.
Yeah.
So you didn't have the lightning bolt from the moment it all started?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It was a summer fling.
So the lightning bolt, and I think these lightning bolt experiences are really interesting because sometimes they create great problems and sometimes they create great renewing properties to a relationship. In other words, is that for you, Tony, is that lightning bolt kind of still with you? Do you still have that? Is that kind of a generator of anything for you, 25 years later?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely is.
Yeah. See, that's been, but here's the problem is if you've had trauma in your childhood, like real trauma, the sources of those lightning bolt attractions make you attracted to people you shouldn't want to be with. So I always tell people, like, think more butterflies, not lightning bolts. But people like lightning bolts. Lightning bolts have lots of good properties to them, unless you have this pattern of bad picking from the lightning bolts from the trauma. And if you can kind of tone it down a little bit, so it's not like, extreme lightning bolts, maybe a little light lightning bolts, but mostly butterflies, maybe that'll work out. But otherwise, I really think people have to get treatment, because that thing that is so renewing for relationships is sort of off when you've had a lot of trauma. It's interesting. I've tried to figure out a philosophy for dealing with that, but I do think, when you have that kind of, you use the word love of my life. Susan, I guess I use that word with you too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm aware that feeling has renewing properties to it that that I could feel at this moment. Like, and for us, it's 40 years later. And so when people ask, how do you do it? How do you do it? It's like, well, there's various things. No idea. But this kind of,
I'm surprised he stayed with me. I mean, here he was, hot doctor. He had all these radio and television shows. Girls were fawning all over him. I was at home with 3 kids. He was on the road. Sexless marriage, like
it wasn't
busting my butt. I mean, I was really lucky that he was in love with me, because I was a tyrant.
You were irritable, but we had a lot going on.
But then I got depressed.
Yeah.
And my hormones started changing early, because I went through menopause at 45, and then I was like super anxious. Then I had to get therapy and get on psychotropics, and then my hair fell out, and then I was more pissed off about that. Didn't feel sexy, felt horrible about myself. And, blamed him for whatever reason for everything, because it's always your fault, Drew.
Well, I'm glad the memories are as disturbing as you described them. They were not. It was not that disturbing to experience.
But you were a workaholic, so you were happy to be at work. And I used to always tell people, like when a producer would come over and go, "We're going to start a new TV show called, Dr. Rehab with Dr. Drew," and I was like, just get him out of the house. He has to be busy. He has to go to work, because he's happiest when he's working. And then he'd get more and more shows, and they'd all pile up. And I knew he was happy doing what he was doing, but it wasn't, we weren't having sex as much as we do now, because he has a lot more free time on his hands. But I wasn't ready for it.
You have a lot more free testosterone on your hands.
Right. I mean, I'm also not raising 3 kids, but I mean, motherhood is a very difficult job. I know I didn't work full time. I was a travel agent. I helped you run your business. I did your travel. I was really busy. I had work, I worked with like adults while I was also raising my kids. Just so
we had triplets, just so you know.
But I was also,
nice.
taking care of a huge house, the kids in their private school, and getting them to all their sports. And, it weighs down.
But you understand, I was aware of that, and I was your teammate.
So I just made sure you worked as much as possible.
We had lots of different priorities that were getting in the way. And this is what Tony and Alisa are talking about, is that those priorities were piling up on the priority of the relationship. And to me, I kind of knew that would eventually relieve itself. And I felt like it was almost an important choice that we made, because all that stuff was real. We really had to do all that stuff, and we did it as teammates, and we, gutted it out and did it.
But it used to really piss me off when people go, "You're so lucky to be married to him."
Ugh, yeah,
and I would go, "Oh," I would freak out. If somebody said that to me, I was like, "Excuse me?" I was like, "Who is he married to? I do everything." Like, I was just like, but now when people say you're so lucky to be married to him, that was like a comment on After Dark recently, and it was like somebody goes, "Oh, she's so snobby. She's so lucky to be married to him." Now I actually agree.
Our present life is such that,
right? Like
agree.
I
But
actually,
nothing has changed.
I want to
really.
apologize if I came off that way, because I do appreciate being married to him, and I did then. But I I think we were just stressed
Yes,
out.
that's our life circumstances are very, very, very different. And that's
But
what
you,
Tony and Alisa are telling us that story
I
over and
married
over
a
again here.
really great guy who's so intellectual. He knows everything about psychology, knows everything about medicine, he knows about biology, he knows about what I'm thinking when I'm not
That's
thinking,
not good
what I'm
necessarily.
thinking when I'm drinking. Like he knows everything about me. He knows how to respond, and he stuck with me, which I was shocked. I was shocked.
Did either of you have
I
any
think it's an
feelings like
amazing
that?
I just think it's an amazing love story what you guys are sharing, and I think the
Yeah,
beauty
yeah,
is that you share it, and
yeah,
more people need to
mm,
hear that at times because, especially in this day and age, with everything looking picture perfect and what we just went through over the last 2 years,
Right.
thinking everybody is perfect.
yeah,
These stories are the
yeah. So
stories that are
I
just
want to
like,
get to
hey,
that's yeah, and you guys went through some shit too. I mean, Susan, the shit went down for them just
Yeah.
like went through.
No, I
You know,
know.
and
Well, I was
here's
lucky
the
'cause
lesson everybody can learn. It pays dividends to find your way through it. It pays dividends
oh,
to invest in
love
it.
it.
You know, and
Yeah.
yeah, and the hearts. It's so easy to go. Yeah, we'll leave. Well, the kids are going to be torn up. Oh well, I can't stand this anymore. It's better than we're not fighting. You know, it's all bullshit. The reality is, if you commit and find your way through and get help and reach out for help and keep going and you get philosophical about exactly what you were talking about, which is, yeah, we got 3 kids and then we got to pay the private school, blah, 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 and I'm a workaholic. It's like, yeah, that's our stage of life right now. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. We'll find our way through this, and it does pay dividends. I got to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about sort of what COVID has been doing to people and lockdowns and that kind of thing. And anything else you guys want to, any wisdom you'd like to impart, we'll get to that as well. I'll be right back.